You are not falling apart, you are being prepared. But nobody told you that preparation would feel like this. Like everything is resisting you at once. Like the peace you once carried has gone quiet. Like you are doing everything right and something is still working against you. What you are experiencing is not evidence that God has stepped back. It is evidence that something significant enough to be worth attacking is coming. There is a principle in Scripture that most believers never fully absorb. The intensity of the opposition in your life is often the most accurate indicator of the scale of what God is building, not your visible progress. The opposition. Because the enemy does not assign significant resistance to insignificant assignments. He never has. And the 5 things you're about to hear are not reasons to be afraid. They are reasons to understand exactly what season you are standing in, and why the very things that have been confusing and disorienting you are actually the clearest evidence that God is not finished. This is not a video built to make you see enemies everywhere. It is a video built to give you a biblical framework for reading a season that most people misread, and in misreading it, either retreat or arrive at what God was building without the formation the preparation was supposed to produce. Stay, because the 5th attack is the one that operates most quietly and does the most damage when it goes unnamed. Attack number 1. The assault on your identity. Before God releases a new level of assignment, something will target what you believe about yourself. Not your circumstances first. Your sense of calling, your confidence in what God said about you, your ability to hold on to the version of yourself God has been building under the weight of a season that keeps asking whether any of it is real. This is not a random attack. It is a targeted one, aimed at the foundation before the building goes higher. In Matthew 3 and 4, the sequence is exact. Jesus is baptized. The Father speaks from heaven. "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." The identity is declared. The assignment is confirmed. And immediately, the Spirit leads him into the wilderness, where the first words of the enemy are, "If you are the Son of God." Not a frontal attack. A question aimed directly at the identity that was just declared. Because the enemy understood something precise. If the identity can be destabilized before the ministry begins, the ministry never reaches what God designed. If you are currently in a season where what you believed about yourself feels harder to hold than it used to, where doubt about your calling has become louder than the clarity you once carried, this is not a sign that you heard God incorrectly. This is a sign that what God declared over you was significant enough to target. Here is what God is doing behind this attack. He is not watching passively. He is doing exactly what he did with Jesus, allowing the pressure to prove the declaration. Because an identity that can only survive easy seasons cannot carry a significant assignment. The wilderness after the baptism was not punishment, it was proof. Here is what you do. Write down the last thing God clearly said about you. Through scripture, through prayer, through a confirmed word. Speak it out loud once a day for the next 7 days. Not as a performance, as an act of anchoring. You are not convincing God. You are refusing to let the pressure convince you. Attack number 2. The isolation. Something has been separating you from your usual sources of strength. The community that used to feel life-giving now feels distant. The relationships that once carried you now feel thin. The spiritual connections that used to be consistent have become irregular, complicated, or altogether quiet. And in that gap, a particular kind of heaviness has moved in. This is one of the most misread attacks in the entire arsenal, because it feels like abandonment. Like God has allowed the very support structures you relied on to quietly dissolve right when you needed them most. But isolation before promotion is a biblical pattern, not a spiritual accident. Moses spent 40 years in Midian before the burning bush. 40 years. A man educated in the most powerful institution in the known world, Pharaoh's palace. Trained in leadership in the systems of an empire. By every visible measure, he was ready the moment he left Egypt. God did not use him for 40 years. Because palace training and wilderness formation are not the same thing. The isolation was not wasted time. It was the specific classroom that produced the specific Moses that the specific assignment required. a man who had been stripped of every credential he brought to God, so that what he carried into the desert was not his own competence but God's command. What Egypt could not remove, Midian did. And what Midian produced, Egypt never could have. Here is what God is doing behind this attack. He is creating the conditions for a deeper dependence, one that cannot be built when every need is being met by external sources. The isolation is not permanent. It is purposeful. It is producing a root system deep enough to hold what comes next. Here is what you do. Resist the urge to fill the silence with noise. Instead, use this season to identify one specific area of dependence on God that has been underdeveloped and invest in it deliberately this week. What the isolation is removing temporarily, God is replacing with something that does not require the same external conditions to sustain. Attack number 3. The sudden discouragement. This one arrives without warning, not gradually, not as a slow drift you could have caught earlier. One morning you wake up and the fight has gone out of you. The vision that was clear feels pointless. The calling you were certain about feels like something you invented. The version of yourself that was pressing forward with confidence has been replaced by one that is quietly wondering whether any of it was real. You did not see it coming. That is exactly how it was designed. In 1 Kings 19, directly after the greatest public victory of Elijah's ministry, fire falling from heaven, 450 false prophets defeated, the rain returning after 3 years of drought. One message arrived, one sentence from one person, and Elijah sat down under a tree and asked God to take his life. The man who had just stood alone against an entire nation's spiritual collapse was undone not by a battle, but by a single wave of discouragement so total it erased the memory of everything God had just done through him. This is what sudden discouragement does. It does not argue with your history. It simply makes your history feel irrelevant. It does not deny what God did. It just makes you feel like what God did was the exception, and what you are feeling right now is the truth. Here is what God is doing behind this attack. He is exposing a dependence on momentum. The next level of your calling will require you to move in seasons where nothing is visibly accelerating, where the victory is not felt, and the only thing keeping you going is rootedness in what God said rather than what you currently feel. He is not allowing the discouragement to break you. He is using it to build in you a staying power that momentum alone could never produce. Do this immediately. Do not make a single major decision while the discouragement is loudest. Elijah's first need after his collapse was not a strategy. It was bread, water, and rest. God's first response to his despair was not a rebuke or a revelation. It was provision for what was human. Attend to what is human first. Eat, sleep, return to the most basic rhythms of care. The clarity will return. If this is already hitting close to home, pause right now and type "I see the door" in the comments. But I want you engaged in this because what's coming next goes even deeper. And if this content is opening your eyes, hit subscribe. Every week we expose the enemy's tactics and equip you to fight back. Attack number 4. The warfare in your closest relationships. Something has introduced tension into the relationships that were once most stable. Misunderstandings that feel disproportionate to their cause. Friction with people who have always been safe. An unusual atmosphere of conflict in spaces that used to carry peace. Relationships that are not ending but are being tested in ways they have not been tested before. This is one of the most draining attacks because it is personal. It targets the people and spaces that carry the most significance for you. In Numbers 12, at the precise moment Moses was leading the most significant assignment of his life, Aaron and Miriam, his own brother and sister, rose against him. Not strangers, his closest people. And the accusation they raised was personal, not theological. They targeted his marriage, his character, his authority. At the moment the assignment was at its heaviest. This is not coincidental. The enemy consistently targets relationships during seasons of significant preparation because he understands that an isolated, relationally wounded leader is a compromised one. Not destroyed, compromised, distracted by pain that should have been peace. Carrying conflict in the very spaces that were supposed to carry restoration. Here is what God is doing behind this attack. He is revealing which relationships can hold the weight of the next season and which ones need to be strengthened, repositioned, or discerned before that season opens. He is also building in you a capacity to lead and love under pressure, because what is coming will require you to carry people through their own warfare without losing your footing in yours. Do this now. Identify the relationship currently under the most pressure. Before you address the conflict directly, ask one question in prayer. Is this tension exposing something that needs to be healed, something that needs to be repositioned, or something that needs to be discerned? The answer will tell you whether to move toward it or seek wisdom before engaging it. Attack number 5. The delay. This is the quietest attack and the most dangerous. Not because it is the most dramatic, but because it works over time, slowly, accumulating evidence that what God said is not coming, that the promise was misheard, that the season of preparation has become the permanent condition. The delay does not arrive loudly. It arrives as a question. Did God really say? And then as a pattern. Nothing is moving. Nothing is shifting. Everything God put in your spirit feels further away than it did the last time you checked. In Genesis 37, Joseph received a dream at 17 years old, a clear, God-given vision of what was coming. He arrived at the fulfillment of that dream at 30 years old, 13 years between the promise and the possession. In those 13 years, he experienced betrayal, false accusation, imprisonment, and being forgotten by someone whose freedom he had helped secure. Every year of that delay would have provided reasonable evidence that the dream was wrong. None of it was evidence of that. All of it was formation. The delay was not the enemy defeating the promise. The delay was God developing the person who would have to carry it. Here is what God is doing behind this attack. He is not withholding. He is preparing. The promise is not late. The preparation is simply producing something in you that the promise requires before it can be safely released. What God is building in the delay is the capacity to steward what is coming without it destroying what He has already built in you. Do this immediately. Write the original promise down, the specific thing God put in your spirit. Beneath it, write every way the delay has developed you since the promise arrived. Because when you map the formation the delay has produced, you begin to see that the season has not been empty. It has been essential. Before you conclude that everything in this video applies directly to your life, pause here and ask yourself 3 honest questions. 1. Does what I am experiencing consistently align with the biblical patterns described in this video? Or am I in a season that might simply require rest, practical wisdom, or support from a trusted community rather than a spiritual framework? Not every difficult season is a spiritual attack. Some seasons are an invitation to slow down, seek counsel, and attend to what is human before what is spiritual. 2. Have I brought this before God in genuine prayer and sought His wisdom about my specific situation? Or am I receiving this video's framework as a substitute for that personal discernment? 3. Is this understanding drawing me closer to Christ? Or is it primarily making me more suspicious of my circumstances, my relationships, and my season without producing deeper trust, greater peace, or a more anchored faith? Biblical discernment always moves toward God. It replaces confusion with clarity, fear with wisdom, and isolation with a deeper sense of His presence. If what you are receiving is producing more anxiety than peace, more suspicion than trust, bring that to Him before applying it further. These questions are not meant to cause doubt. They are meant to ensure that what you receive from this video becomes wisdom in your life, not a lens that distorts what God is actually doing. Every attack in this video has a corresponding prayer and declaration built around it, a biblical framework for reading each one clearly, and a discernment tool for identifying which of the 5 attacks is most active in your current season. Free guide in the description. It was built to be used in the middle of the season, not after it. The most dangerous thing about the season you are in is not the opposition. It is misreading the opposition. Calling preparation abandonment, calling the delay evidence that the promise was wrong. You are not failing. You are being prepared for something that requires exactly the kind of formation this season is producing. The attacks are not evidence that God has forgotten you. They are evidence that what He is building in you is significant enough to be worth fighting against. Type, "I am being prepared" in the comments. Find the person beneath you who typed the same thing and leave them one sentence, the kind that reminds someone in the middle of the preparation that the process has a purpose. Preparation never feels like preparation while you are inside it. It feels like resistance. Until one day you look back and realize every battle was building the person the promise required.